We go out there to go and set out the buildings, identify the boundaries. The block of land is actually, we believe, is smaller than what is actually shown on the plans. There was a design that was done without a survey. It all had to go back to council for a complete redesign of the site.
G'day guys, welcome to the MTDC Lounge. This is a podcast that breaks down everything you need to know about designing and building your ultimate home and what to expect. Whether you're a DIY renovator, a budding developer, or everything in between, we'll dive into the building journey, touching on what to expect, what's next, and how to go about it. We'll hear from a heap of experienced consultants and trades about all aspects. So let's get stuck in. Welcome to the lounge. G'day guys, and welcome to another episode of the MTDC Lounge. You're here with the host Matt, and we've got Mark Scanlon from Mark Scanlon. How are you, mate?
Fantastic. So pleased to be here. Thanks for the invitation.
Very welcome. Mate, we get a lot of questions all the time from all of our clients about surveys and how important it is. So you and your team at Newcastle and Hamilton are probably one of the biggest guys in Newcastle. So who else better to ask these questions than the professional himself?
Thank you.
Mate, I'll kick off straight away. Tell us a bit about yourself, how you guys came to be, and we'll run from that.
Yeah, okay. I'm a local guy, sort of grew up in the local region around here, Lake Macquarie. Went to university in Newcastle and worked with a couple of survey practices locally and then some time overseas, and eventually worked my way back to Newcastle. So I've done the full circle. But 19 years ago, or 19 years and 4 days actually,
Yep.
A guy by the name of Bill Parker and myself, we started up a company called Parker Scanlon, and primarily just doing surveying works. Unfortunately, Bill got ill, and about 2 years into our venture, and sadly passed away. So it's just been myself since then. Due to probably no great skills of my own, but of our fantastic clients, they got busy, so we needed more staff, and we've sort of grown into an organisation where there's about 27 of us now. We've got surveyors, town planners, scheduling team, drafting team, and we're based in Hamilton. The areas that we cover are essentially from the Hawkesbury River up to probably Taree and west out to Muswellbrook and Denman. We sort of do that for our existing clients. Our town planners working all over New South Wales.
Yeah.
And we involved in a whole range of different things, primarily housing. We've worked on maybe up to 1,000 new houses a year with setting out and levels, etc., and doing unit developments, involved with school sites, shopping centres, some industrial and some commercial areas as well.
Yeah, perfect.
So Newcastle is a great place for surveys because there's lots of variety.
Yeah, we're definitely getting up there, and the development that's coming through at the moment is absolutely amazing. So there's definitely a place for us, I suppose.
Yeah.
All right, well let's jump straight into the surveys and the surveyors. What is a surveyor?
Okay, a surveyor is a professional in measurement, mapping and spatial data. So when we talk about spatial data, we're talking about GIS, for instance, and collection of information relating to certificates of title, as in lots and deposited plans. So surveyors, and particularly registered surveyors, are the only people that can work on land definition, and that is including subdivision of land, consolidating lots, forming easements, adjusting titles, even working on Australian height datum. Registered surveyors are the people involved with determining Australian height datum. And surveyors are the custodians of what we call the New South Wales Cadastre. And the Cadastre is the culmination of all the lots and all the deposited plans all over New South Wales. So when you think that all those blocks of land out there with lots and lots of mortgages, mortgages are tied into a certificate of title. So if you get a copy of a title and you've got a mortgage, it's going to be listed on there as a person that has an interest in that property. And as such, the banks don't like handing out money willy-nilly for anything. They want something that's secure. And they rely upon surveyors to have a nice, tight cadastre so they know the limits of blocks of land and where they fit spatially in New South Wales. And I think the estimates are around about $2.3 trillion are tied in with mortgages and ownership of land throughout New South Wales. So surveyors are the ones that look after that.
Mm-hmm. So there's a big job. There's definitely a big job, and there's and one of the things I think is important to let our clients know, and everybody that's listening, is how important it is to get a survey. And there are such a number of surveys that one can get, and I think that's one of the most common misconceptions that a lot of our clients do have. Why do we have to get a survey? What's important? All I want to do is increase, my footprint on my lot. So I guess we'll start right at the bottom. What's our most basic survey that somebody can get?
Okay, so identification surveys, something that used to be extremely popular when I first started in the industry. And with an identification survey, we would locate the position of all the improvements on a property. So we would locate the position of a house, fencing, garages, those sorts of things. And we give a distance from those structures out to the external boundaries. And we would make a comment as to whether or not they're compliant with the regulations. So there's certain setbacks you need to be from side boundaries for fire rating, those sorts of things. And that document would be able to be used for conveyancing purposes. So you're buying and selling, so you know exactly what you're buying. Probably in the last 15 to 20 years, mortgage insurance has come into play. And mortgage insurance is cheaper than what it is to go and get a identification survey. And so people are saying, well, the mortgage insurance basically covers me in case the house that I'm buying is on halfway over the neighbour's property, or the fences are in the wrong spot and that sort of thing. So it covers them in case something terribly goes wrong. And it's mainly the banks that are actually calling on this because they want to have that security. But then they go and get the mortgage insurance, and then 5 years later they need to go and replace the fence. And then they go, well, is the fence on the boundary or not? So that's why the identification survey can be used for those sorts of things. So that's one type of survey. If you're looking to do any sort of development on a property, then we have what we call a detail survey. Detail survey also locates the building and improvements on the property, but we also look at the levels as well. So we want to know whether or not the block is sloping towards the rear or to the front, so that affects your drainage. So how's the storm water going to leave the site? And is it really steep? So can we get a driveway that's going to come in and your car's going to bottom out, or it's going to be a smooth run in? Is an opportunity to have a split level house? So maybe if it slopes away, we're going to have two levels at one end and a single at the other. We also look at where the services are running. The big one's the sewer, not the kind of thing that you can easily go and change, or not cheaply anyway.
No.
So we go and identify where that's located on the block, where the stormwater pipes are. We also look at adjacent buildings. So if you're looking to go through and do an extension on a house, you want to know whether or not the neighbour's building is going to overshadow your property, or the windows, etc., doorways are actually opening out onto where you're looking to extend the house. So the detailed survey becomes the design template for everyone else that looks at. So building design people come along and they use that to go through and design a new structure or the extensions, what happens to be on that property. Council also like to know what's on the site, and if there's any things that are going to be demolished, so they also get identified on the plan. Civil engineers, they look at the stormwater on the site, so they also use that detailed survey plan. And the landscape architects as well. So there's a whole myriad of people that get involved in looking at those plans. So it's really important to get it sorted out in the first instance, and then once that's all locked in and we know what we've got to play with, we know our boundaries, then all those other professionals come in and do their thing.
G'day guys, just quickly, if you're finding this podcast info relevant to you, then I'd like to quickly talk to you about what we do at MT Design Collective. You hear us talk all the time about the importance of solid, detailed home design practices, so that you're not left with extra fees, delays, or unexpected costs in building your ultimate home. Here at MTDC, we design homes and provide plans that builders love to build and councils love to approve. If you're looking at a renovation, a new build, or alteration, then we'd love to help you work out the next steps forward. Book a free, no obligation chat with us, and we'll come out to your site, as it's the only way to truly get authentic, no bullshit advice. Link is in the show notes. Okay, back to the show. So the detailed surveys that we get, have the different levels in heights, and I think there's a level of expectation that I think a lot of people should have from a survey. And in your opinion, is an easement, the sewer line, the things that you'll find on your dial before you dig, those are the things that you should commonly see on a detailed survey.
Absolutely,
that's right. And so, and then obviously, when there's the detailed survey, would you also include and make sure? Would you recommend that any detailed survey that comes out, would you recommend that they check to see that the next door neighbours are put on? Because I know a lot of surveyors at the moment aren't putting the next door neighbours on, and then I guess that's where we find a lot of discrepancies between the prices, and I guess a lot of the surveyors who go out and do the jobs, they do leave some information off, which becomes really problematic end game. Do you see that as an issue?
Yeah, I think that if there's a building that's very close to your property, then overshadowing is going to be a big one straight up. So you're thinking, oh, well, I'm going to double the length of my house. I'm going to extend it out, and I'm going to put solar panels on the roof, and, I'm just going to tap into that. But they don't realise that the building next door actually overshadows your property, so putting the solar panels is going to be not such a great idea.
Yeah.
And we're putting out this fantastic lounge room at the back, family room, and it's all going to open up into a nice big space. But then when you look at the neighbour's property, they've got a big balcony that looks straight down over that space. So we identify those sorts of things as well to ensure that when it comes time to do the design work, then you know what all those constraints and opportunities are going to be. And it may also be some sort of fantastic view corridor, or it could be that there's an enormous tree that's sitting in the back, and there's overshadowing issues with that as well. Or the root zone that's coming out. Yeah,
the root zone and the trees next door have been a very common problem, I guess, in the designing world, because if the tree's not even in your lot or on your property, you're not allowed to touch it. But their root zone affects everything that you put on your block.
Absolutely.
So that is a massive thing, and it's one of the benefits of a detailed survey. One of the things that we do find that we have a bit of a situation with as well is the detailed survey. Even though it says a detailed survey, there is a variation, or there's a percentage of variation. We'll go into the next level after the detailed survey, but what is a common variation percentage of a detailed survey?
So as far as the limits of the information that's picked up,
well, rather than because I know they have a 10% variance. Like, it doesn't, like, they're accurate to a certain level, but there could potentially be like up to a 10% variance as measured. Is that?
No, we've probably. I'll just add in another little component there. So a detailed survey identifies the improvements that are on a block of land and the adjacent area, but we also show the boundaries and the boundary dimensions. And so those dimensions, unless it's old system title, but we could probably get onto that later, those dimensions and the area that is shown on the plan are essentially locked in. So there's no variance on those. With old system title, then there can be. And so this is just something for people to look out for as well. We have a few different types of surveyors. We have what we call our field hands that come out and assist the surveyors. We have a technician surveyor, so that's someone that perhaps has gone through TAFE. And then we've got graduates, so the ones that go through university. And then we have registered surveyors. So the registered surveyors are the only ones that can deal with land titling information. And so if we have a detailed survey that has boundary dimensions shown on it, they have to be prepared by a registered surveyor. So you may find a graduate surveyor, or perhaps even a technician surveyor, if they come along and do a detailed survey, legally they can't show what the boundaries are. They can show there's a house here, there's a shed here, there's a fence there, but they can't show where the boundaries are.
Yeah, right.
So that's just something to keep in mind. So if you're going to get a quote for a particular detailed survey and somebody comes along that's half the price of everyone else, then find out whether or not they're actually a registered surveyor. And if they're not, then they can't actually show the boundaries. And that becomes pretty important if you're looking to maximize your parcel of land and put on a really large house or build something that's close to the boundary. Then they have to know where that boundary is to be compliant with BCA.
So is there a way to find out if your surveyor is a registered surveyor or not?
Yeah, there's you can jump onto the websites and go through, and there's a whole list of registered surveyors there.
Is that,
or even just looking at their websites, or just ask the question.
Yep.
Are you registered?
Like builders, is there like a Service New South Wales kind of register, or is there?
Yeah, you can go to it's called BOSSI, Board of Surveying and Spatial Information.
Yep, there you go.
List of registered surveys there.
Yeah, beautiful, excellent. One of the fun things I think about surveying is how you guys actually get your heights for the AHD. Some have compared it to that of a geocaching, or finding little fun hidden bits that you run your numbers off.
Yeah.
I'd love to know the story.
Love surveying. Okay, so there's a number of different things scattered all over New South Wales, and the two in particular, one is called an SSM, a State Survey Mark, and they're usually a brass plug about so big, and there's a shaft on it. So you drill a hole into concrete or whatever, and you aerodite them in. And so that's one form of what they call a permanent mark.
Do you find those are those the ones on the gutters that you'd set?
Yep, see them around the place, and you can always tell when there's a surveyor walking down the street, because they're always the ones that are looking down. There's a state survey mark there, there's a drill hole and wing there. It's just what we do. We just look on the ground.
Yep.
We also have other ones called a permanent mark, and they look a bit like a hydrant cover. So they're a cast iron lid, about the size of an A4 piece of paper, and you lift them up, and inside there's a stainless steel pin, and that's sitting in a big lump of concrete. And so spatial services, they go through and they coordinate those state survey marks and also these other PMs with the pin, and they will go and give a coordinate, like a latitude and longitude coordinate. And they would also go through and determine a strain height datum on those points. So not all of them have AHD, and not all of them have an accurate coordinate. So typically, if we're doing a detailed survey, we will have a connection into a strain height datum, so we know how far above mean high water mark a block of land is. And so we use those marks to go through and transfer the data or the level from those points actually onto a site.
I'm glad you mentioned that, because the Australian height data is the thing that marks, I guess, how high land is above sea level, I'm pretty sure.
Yeah.
And that becomes important when someone's designing, say, in a flood zone or a flood area. And then that's when one would ask for an AHD or an Australian height data survey. But then there's also the other assumed data. And if it's assumed, then you're also assuming that you're not in a flood zone and it's not so much required.
Yes, yeah. So if you go out to one of the newer states and there's no houses, just basically dirt everywhere, and a few pegs showing, well, there's your lot. We wouldn't necessarily do a detailed survey because there's no information to pick up. There's no fencing, there's no buildings, there's nothing. So we would do what we call a contour survey, which essentially just takes the levels over a block. And in most cases, if they're sitting on the top of a hill, then there's no flood issues. So that can be just done on an assumed datum. So we might call a particular point out on the curb level 10 or level 100, and then everything's relative to that. Depending on which council area you're working in, some of them actually insist that all the information that goes in is on Australian height data. Some are okay with just an assume, but certainly many of them insist on AHD. And there's a whole range of reasons why AHD is good for particularly larger developments. If you're looking at, say, for instance, if you've got a place which has got a bit of a slope on it and there's view corridors, then there may be a restriction for Australian height datum height. So you can only go so high. So that means the person behind you can actually look over the top of your property and still maintain the view. So sometimes AHD is there to maintain a minimum floor level because you're in a flood area, and then other times it's going the other way. You can't be too high.
Yeah, well, that's what we design for. There's a lot of like 8.5 meters in most cases, I guess, for height levels and things like that, and that's where we come in to our own, I suppose. So let's say we've bought a block and you've done your survey and bits and pieces. How often do you find blocks without easements to drain water and things like that, particularly when we're running backwards?
Yeah, certainly in older parts of town, if it's a knockdown rebuild, for instance, the old rubble pit in the backyard used to suffice, but now houses are bigger and filling up more of the lot, so there's more runoff, there's more driveways, more roof, so the water needs to be collected and managed. And the older areas, there's just no easements there, which can be
expensive ordeal, right?
Yes. So perhaps a knock on the neighbour's door and a case of beer or wine in hand, and saying, "Can we have a little chat about stormwater issues?" There's two ways you can look at that. One is that if I'm the person on the lower side of the block and somebody wants to put an easement through my property, then it's going to be an easement that will restrict things that you can do on your property in the future. But the easement is probably only 1 metre wide, and typically it'll run down the side of the house. So you can't build anything there anyway, so you're not really restricting anything. And the other thing too is that forever and a day, water hits the grass, runs over land, and then flows into the downhill property. And so there's often flooding issues there and water issues on those properties. So if you go through and formalise it and putting in stormwater pipes and pits, you're actually collecting that water, which means that the person on the lower side actually has a dry backyard. And to some extent, that's probably worthwhile considering as a good outcome. So yes, the guy on the high side, he gets an easement through my property, but also my backyard stays dry. It doesn't flood.
Might be asking out of turn though. Like who would foot the bill for that usually? Like whose problem is that? Like understanding that the lower side guy is always going to have the damage, I suppose, but and the higher side guy needs it. Who should be liable, and who should follow? I guess that guideline. What becomes that conversation? What should happen in the process?
So typically it's in these older areas and somebody wants to build a big house or extensions or whatever, goes to council, and council says, I can see it's sloping to the rear. Then the council puts a restriction or some sort of notice as a condition in their DA consent that they have to go through and control the stormwater. So then it comes onto the owner to go through and makes it their problem. Yeah, right. Even though sometimes it's a historical problem whereby those original estates, when they were designed, there was no stormwater infrastructure put in place. Lake Macquarie Council, which is where we are at the moment, there's a whole range of weird things going on, like large pipes and culverts running through people's backyards where there's no easements or no records whatsoever of these things. And sometimes we've had scenarios where somebody's gone out to go and do some extensions on a property and they're going out there and sort of just digging around and go, oh, there's a pipe there or a culvert, and we want to actually build over this space and they can't do it. So
We've had that. We've had so many issues. Had so many issues like that. Like we've had a Gemna pipe going through one of the blocks, and that was all hidden. Couldn't touch it. Turns out that there was an easement there that wasn't really notified. We've had a great big dirty like NBN pipe. Like it wasn't NBN, but it was like the old school fiber optic stuff.
Yes, yeah.
That was notified. That was on the block, and we only found that out when they started digging, and that was crazy. And one of the common things that we do find, and particularly in the Lake Macquarie area, God love them, is that there was so many blocks that had just been split, but no water, no runoff, nothing had been considered, and that, like I guess parent lots or the lots before they become subdivided, they never had to consider. They never had to consider an easement to drain water and everybody down the side. And there's just been countless times where we've had a job and we've had somebody come through and said, "Hey, we want to build this great big house." And we're like, "Yeah, rock and roll, let's do it." And then all of a sudden it's like, "Well, where are you gonna put your water?"
Yeah. Well, back in the day, it was a 3-bedroom house and 1 bathroom, and that was it. And the footprint was only pretty small on a big block. And the backyard was someone to kick a soccer ball around in a veggie patch. And
mud bath.
Yeah. Whereas now those big blocks are being chopped up into smaller ones, and then bigger houses trying to fit on a lot more runoff. So
a lot of them are getting forced to do like pump out systems now. And pump out systems are good for council because they don't have to care about looking after them, and then it becomes the person's problem. But then it's like, who's going to pay for, are you going to pay for the upkeep and the maintenance of a pump out system, or are you going to ask old mate behind you and ask to maybe chuck him a couple of bucks for a portion of his block? And it's just one of those things. But one of the things that I think is incredibly important, particularly around that Lake Back, Newcastle, and going further out Maitland and Cessnock, is the I guess the older blocks that you're talking about, the old surveys, the old titles. I've got some really gross and really horrific stories that I'll share after you explain to us what it is. But I think people need to know about it, particularly in these areas. So shoot.
Yeah. So I was just sort of thinking back. I did some work in Queensland and northern New South Wales, and some of the areas I was working in, they were only relatively new towns, and so everything was planned. There was easements everywhere, and everything was really controlled. And then sort of come back here, and in particular, in the city of Newcastle and some of those older areas around Lake Macquarie. When there's no infrastructure in place, and that's when it gets a bit interesting trying to work it all out. And my only real advice is to have the conversation with the neighbour, talk about the predicament, and if the neighbour's not happy because you want to go and build this really big house there, and it's going to be much bigger than what they want, it's going to spoil their view or whatever it happens to be. The stormwater component is just really a minor thing, because there's always that option of a tank and a pump out, and that big house is still going to get built there, irrespective as to where the stormwater's going. So if you can have that conversation with them and talk about the benefits for both parties and controlling that stormwater, then I think that's a good way to go. Because those, as you said, those pump outs, it's ongoing maintenance and there's a cost involved, and
always
just let gravity do its thing. That's why I invented it.
Well, so with our old surveys, I know like out in Cessnock and things like that. How does one identify whether or not they have a registered boundary, and what does that mean for somebody who owns a block without an actual registered boundary alignment?
So if people don't really know sort of where their boundaries are, so any person that goes to buy a parcel of land, essentially what they're buying is what's listed in their certificate of title, and it'll have a lot and a deposited plan number. So then you would engage a surveyor to come out and perhaps mark those corners out for you. Actually, it was only just this morning there was it was brought to my attention. There was an article on the ABC about a family, I'm pretty sure it was in New South Wales, that spent the last 2 years in court trying to come to some sort of an agreement for a house that was put onto a wrong block of land. So a real estate agent identified the parcel of land for this couple. It was in a rural area. And they said, well, here's your block of land and there's your corners here and here. And so they had a house that sort of came through on the back of a truck, quite a substantial one, and plonked it there. And that was all fine and well until the actual owner of that block of land came along and said, that house is actually on my block of land and you need to remove it. So there was quite a process that they had to go through with that, and eventually they had to take it off the site. But if they had a surveyor to come out and identify where their land is and to work out the extents of their corners and if the fencing is in the right spot, that sort of thing, then they could have actually put the house in and had some sort of security behind it as well.
So it's been explained to me back in in a few ways that once upon a time the boundaries were identified by where you put your fence, and that was basically how you and your next door neighbor kind of got along and said, hey, this is my block, this is your block, everybody's happy, let's move on. But now that there's the system of the Lands and Environment and Registry Services, they now have everything registered, and everything's registered in a certain space. So what we're finding now, and there's a particular guy out in Cessnock that we've looked after, him and 4 other shops, commercial shops, are on, I guess, a parcel of land where they've all shared these assumed boundaries. And then it got to a point where he's like, okay, well now I'm ready to establish my boundary and I want to build all this stuff, and all of a sudden it's like, well, as a matter of fact, nobody really knows where your boundary is. Like we don't, like nobody, there is no boundary for you. And then all of a sudden he goes, well, I want a boundary. And then you go, okay, well you can get a boundary, but then next door is going to need a boundary, and then next door is going to need a boundary. And then all of a sudden, all these shops down this road are like, well, now we're up to $4,500 a piece to try and establish our boundaries between everybody. And this is a real problem around, I guess, a lot of spaces, I guess, around New South Wales. But because it hasn't been registered in the LRS, then we have that there is that very great potential for I guess people building over your boundary or taking a little bit extra space and making things really difficult.
Yeah. Do you want to go down the old system title path?
I sure do.
Oh yeah, here we go. Okay, so back in the day when those big tall ships came into Australia and they said, oh, well, this is where we're going to start subdividing land. And so there was land grants that were given. So back in the day, the surveyors that sort of were operating, they came out and they identified big parcels of land, and over time they all got sort of smaller and smaller. So when people were coming in to buy one of these parcels of land, or it was granted to them, most of it was just done as a written description. So you'd have a piece of paper and it says, on the corner of Smith and Jones Street, head northward for 200 feet to get to the corner, and then go south for 25 feet and then west for 30 feet. And then it will sort of just describe your parcel of land. And, usually it's just a rectangular shape, which makes it nice and simple. But it's all hinging on the corner of Smith Street and Jones Street. Where is that? So, there's, we can go out the front here. We can see there's a bit of bitumen on the road and there's a bit of concrete curb. So is that the boundary? That's a road. It's a physical road that we can drive on. But where actually is the boundary? And, okay, there's a fence there. But is that fence actually on the boundary? And I can tell you now that after being doing this for 35 plus years, not every fence is on a boundary. It just happens to be put in the place where the old one was, because that was convenient. So the land back then was what they call now old system title. So it's just a description. And so Land Registry Services, what we call LRS now, they've been undertaking this process of converting the old system title into the new system, which is called Torrens title. And with Torrens title, what you're buying is a lot in a deposited plan, and your certificate of title will give you the descriptions as to what the lot and deposited plan number is, and its location. So it's, in a particular LGA and suburbs and that sort of thing. And so the plan that comes with that shows the dimensions of the property, shows where Smith and Jones Street intersection is, and also shows what they call reference marks. So they're survey marks that have been placed by the surveyors, because when you come in to build your house and put your fences in, all your boundary corner pegs, they all get knocked out. So how do you reinstate where those boundaries are? So you go out and you find these reference marks, which are often buried in the ground or a mark in a curb, and surveyors use those to reinstate where those original boundaries were. And so all the new estates around the place, they're all very well defined, and they're down accuracies, to the millimetre really. And surveyors can reinstate where those boundaries are, even if all the pegs get knocked out. So back with the old system title stuff, there was none of that. There was nothing to go through and reinstate where those boundaries were. So surveyors had to rely upon, old fencing, old surveys that were done in particular areas, and perhaps just having a stab in the dark as to, I think it's there from the evidence that's around me. So with this transition from the old system title to Torrens title, it was done so that the people that've got the old system land can actually have a certificate of title and a plan. But all the plan is just basically a rectangle that's drawn from the description. So they go, oh yes, we go north for 20 metres, and then we go east for 30 metres, and there's the plan. But it doesn't show any boundary connections or how they all fit in. Yeah. And so that's what they call limited title. And so the big difference between old system title and limited title compared to Torrens title is that the state government guarantees that if you're buying lot number 6 in DP 1234 and it's 800 square metres, then the state government will guarantee that you're getting 800 square metres, and that's the dimensions. If it's old system title or if it's limited title, state government won't guarantee it.
Yep.
So that's a big flag for anyone that's coming in to buy land.
Yep.
That was old system or limited title, is that the land registry services or our surveyors, they don't know what your real actual dimensions are and the area of your land until they go through and do a full survey. So becomes pretty important if you're looking to do some extensions, and these are all over New South Wales. Rural areas, metropolitan areas. But it becomes a real problem when you've got, say, somewhere in Hamilton or Islington where there are only really narrow blocks, and you've got a house there that's pretty close to a boundary, and you want to do some extensions, and you go, well, where's the boundary? It's limited title. So the surveyors need to come out and do a really thorough survey of those boundaries to lock in and remove that limitation off the title and lock in where those dimensions are. And we've got a policy, as many surveyors do, that we won't go through and set out extensions on a property if it's limited title, unless we go through and do a full survey to go through and lock in those boundaries. If it's going to be, say, 4 or 5 metres off a boundary, then, that's fine. But in most cases, it's down to 0.9 of a metre, which is the minimum offset.
That's right.
So so that's when we say, no, it's not worth the risk. It's not worth the risk for us, and it's not worth the risk for you. Because
there's a whole thing. There's a whole thing that goes in place, and your surveys are a legal document.
Absolutely.
And that's it's boiling all the way back to the original conversation of like, these are important, and these are why clients need to get them at as early as humanly possible. So you mentioned Torrens title. There is also the strata title. What are the differences between the two?
So with Torrens title, you own the parcel of land, and you can do on it really whatever you want, so long as it's within the council constraints of, you can't build a 10-story tower. It's got to be a certain distance off the boundaries, but you can put a house on it, and if you want, you can paint it pink and purple, and no one can stop you. You can just do whatever you want on your block. You can have your statues in the front yard, backyard, whatever you want. With a strata, you own typically just the airspace within the walls of the building. So you don't actually own the building itself. The building is owned by what they call the owners corporation. So who is the owners corporation? That is it's a culmination of all the owners of that particular strata development. So there might be, say, 10 strata units, and that could be all single story or it could be high rise. So the 10 owners, they are the members of the owners corporation, and they have meetings to discuss what is going to happen with the building and the common property areas. So for instance, if there's a leaking roof, or the building needs some maintenance, they need to go and have it repainted, the owners corporation will decide as to who's going to do that, how much it's going to cost, how much they're going to fork out, and that sort of thing. But the owners, the individual owners, they can do whatever they want within the confines of the inside of the walls of their units. But the walls themselves are owned by the owners corporation, so you can't go through and change them. You can't go out the front and paint them pink and purple or whatever else, unless the owners corporation say that's a great idea.
So, and I think it's important to note. I think it's important to note that like a strata doesn't mean that these houses are joined. Like these are on the block, and a strata is just a bunch of dwellings or a bunch of properties on the same block under the owners corporation that don't have a specific title assigned to that house. So I think that's really important to make sure that the clients are completely across, I think.
Yeah. So if, for instance, there's 10 units, there's actually 11 certificates of title that are issued. So there's one title for every lot or every unit, and that's what you own. And there's another title that's created for the common property. And it's the owners corporation that are the owners of that particular title. And so that also comes into things like maintenance on the buildings. So people may have heard of a thing called a sinking fund. So if you're in a strata unit, then everyone contributes money into a sinking fund. And so the owners corporation sets up bank accounts. They also set up insurance, public liability and things like that on the property. And the money that gets accumulated with that then goes to doing maintenance. For instance, if there's a crack in the driveway that everybody uses, then the money is used to go and fix that up. If there's more landscaping that needs to be done, like retaining walls fallen over, for instance, then everyone contributes from the sinking fund into that. So it's important that if you're coming in to buy a strata unit, not so much the high-rise ones, but in a low-rise, small development site, to go through, whether it's yourself or your conveyancer, to have a look at the minutes of the meetings of the previous owners corporation meetings, because they will talk about, retaining wall down the front there. It's been starting to fall over for 5 years now. We really should do something about it. But it's going to cost $100,000 to fix it. We've only got $90,000 in the sinking fund. Maybe everyone needs to chip in more money, or we'll just turn a blind eye, and because it's only really affecting people in units 1 and 2. So I encourage people to go through and check the minutes of those meetings to find out things that may crop up, and all of a sudden you spend your last penny buying this strata unit, and then find that you've got to find another $5,000 to go and fix something that was broken years ago. So
again, the builders reports and all that kind of stuff should cover all that business as well, which is important to definitely get. Where do you see the future? Where do you see the future of the surveying leading to? I mean, you've got the LiDAR systems, which are the overhead 3D systems that we spoke about very briefly. And do you see this? Do you see the manpower still needing to go into it? Do you see that there are going to be some technological advances, in the survey space that will make things accurate, faster, and easier to do? Is that happening in the system?
So the surveying profession, I suppose, has been running for hundreds of years now, and for 2/3 of that, we were just using a tape measure and perhaps a compass, magnetic compass, to do all our work. And then they invented a theodolite, which is an instrument that sits on a tripod and reads horizontal angles and vertical angles, which was fantastic, but still using a pull-out tape measure.
Yeah.
And then they invented this thing called EDM, which was electronic distance measuring, where you have a prism and you've got your instrument, you hit a button and it sends a pulse out and it comes back, and then you can measure a distance. Groundbreaking, fantastic.
It's a beautiful thing.
Yeah, so you're not, going through the Lantana, pulling a tape measure through. But that was something that only really came into play, EDM probably back in the late 70s, early 80s. And then we're using robotic instruments now. So we set up a tripod, we put the instrument on the top, and then we've got a little prism, and the instrument just tracks you. So you just walk around and it just follows you everywhere you go. So much quicker, collect so much more data. But they've only really been around for probably the last 10 years. GPS used to be this huge box, used to sit outside and used to track, maybe the 10 satellites that were floating around at the time. And you get some information after about 2 or 3 days of processing. The GPS that we're using now is using American satellites, Russian satellites, Chinese satellites, and we can get a fix pretty much anytime, any place, anywhere, and so much more accurate. You've got a GPS in your car. It'll get you probably plus or minus maybe 4 or 5 meters. If you're lucky, change lanes, or not that far. The ones we're using are horizontal, will probably get us within about 10 or 15 millimeters, and height-wise is probably maybe about 20 millimeters.
It's pretty good.
So
it's amazing.
But they're things that are only just really a relatively new invention. LiDAR. Got a plane, flies over, it's got this instrument, it sends out pulses, it bounces back, picks up information. We put that data through software and we can generate contours. Beauty about LiDAR, it also will get a signal back off the top of the tree and also a signal off the ground. So you can look at heights of trees to go and get that information. We're using drones now, and so much so that we can actually put compact LiDAR units onto the drones. So we don't need a big fixed-wing plane anymore. We can use a drone and fly around and collect the information. These are all things that are only just come into play probably the last 5 or so years. We're using terrestrial laser scanners. So we'll set up the scanner. We'll be in a room like this, and the scanner, depending on what sort of precision you want to set on it, determines how many pulses it sends out, which is probably about 1 to 1.1 million pulses a second.
Wow.
So there's a lot of data
in
a very short period of time. But it'll pick up every detail that you see. It'll pick up the detail in these microphones, the ceilings, the walls. Whatever it can see is what you'll get. And you'll get that in a 3D point cloud. So these are all massive things that have happened just in only the last couple of years. And for the history of surveying, 2/3 of it we're pulling out a tape measure. And so what does the next 5 years look like? I'm not really sure. But whatever it is, it's probably been invented at the moment. And there'll be some sort of fancy software that'll make it faster and better and more accurate.
Just start doing the measurements from the office.
Well, it's not unheard of to, and I wrote a paper on this a little while back about perhaps having drones, instead of having a survey practice where you've got a whole bunch of vehicles, they're all set up with theodolites and tripods and whatever else, and they all drive off to the sites. Every day you'll have on your roof a whole series of drones, and you'll just push the button, the drone will fly out to the site and use the LiDAR to go and collect all the information and fly back and process it on the way in.
That's incredible.
It's doable. It's with the technology we have now. It is doable. CASA might have a few things to say about it, but that sort of thing is available. And so, what's it going to look like in the next 5 years? I'm not really sure, but it's exciting.
The accuracy, I think, is going to be the most exciting thing, and it's going to be the easiest thing to have the conversation. I think like making sure that all of our documentation is accurate and available. It's something that's fast, accurate, and easy to use. I think is just going to make the industry so much easier. And like we can't do our job without you guys, and it's so important to get a survey that's accurate. And I guess that leads on to the last question. I mean, what do you wish that kind of people knew before coming out to see, or what do you want people to know before actually getting a survey, and why it's important?
Yeah. So depending on what your project is, say for instance, it was someone that wants to come in and build a new house or renovate their house, to go through and get a detailed survey done, just to identify what's on the land and to identify any problems with the boundaries. Once that's been locked in, then people such as yourself can move ahead with confidence with that information, knowing, okay, I know my constraints now. I know that I can't go any further this way. I can't go any further in the heights or whatever. And so I can design something that's going to fit into that space.
Yeah.
And then it'll flow on to the engineers and geotech people and everyone else to go through and do their part. So councils are requiring this information as well. So it just makes a lot of sense to go through and get it done. A bit of a horror story that just comes to mind. It was a builder, a young guy, had a young family, and he decided that he'd like to get into developments. And so he bought a parcel of land that was DA and CC approved for 5 units. And so he knew how to build. He didn't know about the DA process or anything else, but he knew how to, put timber together and build structures. That was his thing. Yeah. So he bought it, which was essentially hit the start button, let's go. We were asked by the builder to come out and actually mark out the position for those units. And we got there and we first of all had to go and identify where the boundaries were.
And there's also that's also a peg out survey too. We haven't really spoken about that.
So many things.
Yeah, it's so called that one there is called the peg out survey. It's usually done after the approvals have all been done.
Yes, yeah. Yep. And that's usually one of the DA conditions that needs to be set out by a registered surveyor.
Yeah.
So we go out there to go and set out the buildings and identify the boundaries, and then we go, the block of land is actually, we believe, is smaller than what is actually shown on the plans. Oh, no. And so there was a design that was done without a survey.
Oh, no.
And so instead of being the 5 units, I think it was, we couldn't fit them on.
Yep.
And so it all had to go back to council for a complete redesign of the site. And so in the end, they end up only getting 4 units onto it. And so the yield that this young guy was expecting, selling 5 units, 5 3-bedroom units, compared to only selling 4, it was a pretty rough sort of time.
Yeah.
Plus, there was 6 months in that process of getting them redesigned and then approved through council.
Yeah.
So
holding costs, redesign costs,
all of that. So that if they had a detailed survey that was done in the first instance, then they would have identified, this was old system title.
Yeah.
Yeah. So they would have identified that there was not as much land there as what they were hoping. Because you always got to finish on a good note.
Yeah.
There was a property at Mayfield that we did, and it was also old system title.
Yeah.
And we actually found there was an additional 7 meters of depth in this block. And so they got another unit out of that.
That's amazing.
So
that's craziness.
Yes.
That's crazy.
There's winners and losers and everything.
It's we hear it all the time. We deal with it all the time, and it's one of our things that we push for. And I think we're probably one of the only design teams that actually push for a survey before we do any designs, because we've heard that horror story so much. Like And if they don't have that survey, they don't have that. We only talked about it on the podcast the other day. Like, we had a builder that just built it without getting the peg out survey, and then he gave us a call and said, "Hey, this is not right. Like, this is too close." And we're like, "Well, did you get the peg out survey?" And he said, "No." Well, how you gonna find out? Like, we can only assume from the detailed survey that we have. You need that peg out survey to first find out exactly if that's where you're designing, if that's where you're building, and that's the important part. And I mean, there's so much important stuff about the survey, and I can't drive the surveys enough. I think it's a great opportunity.
Well, what is typically the biggest investment a person will ever make in their life?
Yep.
It's always good to get in the right spot.
I completely agree, mate. I agree. Thanks for coming out again, mate. I really appreciate it. There are still a million questions. We only scratched the surface. We had the ident, we had the contour surveys and the detail surveys, and we briefly spoke about the peg out surveys. But the peg out surveys are a big thing right at the end. We'll have to get you back on for another chat, and I really appreciate it. Do you have any other off lines, but like, is there anything else you want to talk about at all?
Just surveyors have a great affinity with the land. They're out in the field, so they're good people to ask advice as to whether or not you can do certain things on that parcel of land, because they know the slope, they know a little bit about the vegetation, but they're also connected with other professionals. They're connected with the engineers and design people and geotech and everyone else as well. So I think if you go and contact your local registered surveyor, talk to them about what you can and can't do. Town planning is one area that registered surveyors also need to be qualified into as part of our registration process. And they'll put you in the right path to getting a good result.
A good surveying mob is always a great team to have. I know we need you guys as much as our next consultant. So it's always super important to 100% get a good mob that are great at what they do.
Yeah. And if you've got friends and family out there, or maybe high school kids are looking for a career, then I'd highly recommend doing surveying. There's an acute shortage of surveyors throughout Australia, and this might give you a bit of an indication. Registered surveyors in New South Wales, average age is about 57. So it'll be another 10 years' time, and there won't be many registered guys around.
I think surveying is a great job. You get to walk around outside all day, and then you get to sit in the office. I think it's a great job. Yeah,
you can pick and choose which days you want to go out.
Exactly. Well, thanks again, mate. I really appreciate it. And there you have it, guys. Thanks for joining us again tonight. Thanks for joining us, Mark. I really appreciate it. If you've got any questions, please feel free to shout out and reach out to Mark and his team. Thanks, mate.
Great.
Appreciate it. Thank you. Thanks for listening to this week's app of The Lounge. To make sure you don't miss out on the next episode, hit subscribe. We'd love to get the message out to more homeowners like you. Make sure you leave a rating and a review, and we'll see you on the next app.